The conference room smelled of stale coffee and cheap ambition. Bradley Vance, a man whose corporate experience consisted entirely of being the founder's nephew, leaned across the mahogany table and shoved a single-page document toward me. "You're done, Howard," he sneered, his voice dripping with unearned authority. "Gross negligence. We're terminating you for cause. No severance, no transition package. Pack your things and be out of the building by noon." I looked at the paper, then at Bradley's smug face, and then at his 22-year-old son, Logan, who was trying and failing to look like a hardened executive. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't argue. I simply folded the paper, placed it in my breast pocket, and smiled. They thought they had just saved $210,000. They had no idea they had just cut the throat of their own logistics empire. To understand how we arrived at that mahogany table, you have to understand the invisible machinery of international logistics. Most people think shipping is just trucks and containers. They don't see the legal iron curtain that sits between a cargo ship and American soil. For 18 years, I was the man who raised that curtain for Apex Global Freight. I started with the company back in 2008 when Richard Vance, Bradley's uncle, ran the business from a 3-room office near the port of Newark. In those days, we handled less than $5 million in annual revenue, mostly moving raw textiles and cheap electronics. I was 34 years old then, a licensed customs broker, with a decade of compliance experience already under my belt. Richard knew the operations side, but he didn't know the federal regulations. He hired me to build our customs compliance department from scratch. Over the next nearly 2 decades, I built Apex's compliance infrastructure into an ironclad vault. We grew to an $85 million logistics powerhouse, and our crown jewel was our contract with Detroit Auto Components, or DAC. We handled their entire import pipeline, $34 million worth of precision-machined engine blocks, transmission components, and fuel injection systems arriving from specialized factories in Japan and Germany every single year. My job was to keep that pipeline moving. If a container of fuel injectors sits on a dock for 24 hours because of a paperwork error, the automotive assembly plant in Michigan stops. When that plant stops, it costs DAC $120,000 an hour. Our contract with them had a liquidated damages clause that passed those costs directly to Apex if the delay was our fault. Because of this extreme risk, compliance wasn't just a department, it was the lifeblood of the company. Under federal law, specifically Title 19 of the Code of Federal Regulations, or 19 CFR, cannot operate a corporate customs brokerage without a qualifying licensed individual. I was that individual. My name, my license number, and my personal CPAT certification were the sole legal foundations of Apex's corporate customs broker license. Without a licensed broker of record actively employed in supervising operations, a corporation cannot legally file customs entries, clear cargo, or manage bonded warehousing, but my involvement went even deeper into the financial bedrock of the company. 3 years ago, Apex underwent a major expansion, building a state-of-the-art bonded warehouse in Chicago to store high-value auto parts duty-free before they were shipped to the assembly lines. To operate a bonded warehouse, Customs and Border Protection, or CBP, requires a continuous customs bond. At the time, Bradley Vance had just been brought in as chief financial officer by his uncle Richard, who was starting to step back from daily operations. Bradley, eager to show off his financial wizardry, managed to default on a series of short-term commercial credit lines, which trashed Apex's corporate credit rating. When we applied for the $500,000 continuous customs bond required for the new warehouse, the underwriters flatly rejected the corporation. Richard was in a panic. Without the bond, the Chicago warehouse was a useless concrete shell, and the DAC contract would be terminated. I stepped in. I agreed to back the $500,000 continuous customs bond with my personal guarantee and my own customs broker license, using a specialized rider. However, my attorney drafted a strict personal indemnity agreement between myself and Apex. Section 12 of that agreement stated that the continuous bond was tied directly to my employment. If my employment with Apex was terminated for any reason, I retained the absolute right to revoke my personal guarantee and cancel the bond with 24 hours' notice, leaving Apex to secure a replacement. Richard signed it without hesitation. Bradley, who didn't understand customs regulations and only cared about the immediate cash flow, didn't even read it. Then, 6 months ago, Richard Vance retired completely, leaving the company in the hands of Bradley, who promoted himself to Chief Operating Officer. Bradley immediately brought in his son, Logan, a kid fresh out of college with a degree in sports marketing, and made him the warehouse operations manager in Chicago. Logan was lazy, arrogant, and spent most of his time trying to automate processes he didn't understand. I watched the compliance standards I had spent 18 years building begin to rot from the inside out. The trouble started when Logan decided to speed up container intake by bypassing the mandatory seal verification process. Under CPAT security guidelines, every import container must undergo a 7-point inspection, and the high-security bolt seal numbers must be physically verified against the ocean bill of lading before the container is unsealed and admitted to the bonded warehouse. If the seals don't match, or if they are broken, the container must be quarantined immediately and CBP must be notified. Logan thought this was a waste of time. He told his dock workers to just cut the seals and unload the containers, logging the seal numbers as verified in the ACE portal without looking at them. I caught this during a routine internal audit and warned Bradley that they were playing with fire. Bradley told me to stop micromanaging his son. "We are in the logistics business, Howard, not the policing business," he told me. "Your job is to push paper, not slow down our trucks." I documented the warning, filed it in my personal records, and waited. The storm was coming, and Bradley had just torn the roof off his own house. The incident that Bradley used to destroy my career occurred on a rainy Tuesday in early April. 3 ocean containers containing specialized engine control units for Detroit Auto Components had arrived at the Chicago bonded warehouse. These units were the brains of DAC's new line of hybrid utility vehicles. Each container held $4 million worth of cargo, and the supply chain was timed to the minute. If the components didn't arrive at the Michigan assembly plant by Friday morning, the assembly line would go dark. Logan was running the warehouse floor that day. The delivery trucks had been delayed by a bad storm on the highway, and they arrived 3 hours behind schedule. The truck drivers were angry, the warehouse crew was anxious to go home, and Logan was panicking because the cargo intake metrics for the month were slipping. According to the CPAT security logs, Logan's team was supposed to inspect the high-security bolt seals on each container, compare the unique seal serial numbers printed on the metal bands with the numbers listed on the customs entry documents, and log the verification. When the first container rolled up, the bolt seal was intact. The second was also secure, but the third container had a bolt seal that was visibly cracked and bent, hanging loosely from the locking mechanism. Any experienced logistics manager would have known what that meant. A compromised seal is a red flag for cargo theft, smuggling, or tampering. Under customs regulations, that container had to be quarantined immediately, the doors kept locked, and a formal notification filed with Customs and Border Protection. Instead of following the protocol, Logan did what he always did when faced with a roadblock. He took a shortcut. He didn't want to deal with the paperwork or the delay that a quarantine would cause. He ordered the forklift drivers to cut the broken seal, open the doors, and unload the pallets of engine control units. When one of the dock supervisors, a veteran worker named Victor Harris, hesitated and pointed out the broken seal, Logan snapped at him. "We don't have 3 days to wait for a customs inspector to come out here and look at a piece of metal," Logan told him. "Just scan the pallets into the warehouse management system and get the trucks out of here. I'll sign off on the security log myself." Logan then logged into the automated ACE Customs portal and checked the verification box, certifying under penalty of perjury that all 3 seals were intact and matched the manifest. He didn't realize that the ocean carrier had already filed a report indicating that the seal had been damaged during terminal handling at the port, and CBP was already tracking the container for a random inspection. 2 days later, 3 armed Customs and Border Protection officers arrived at the Chicago warehouse for a random spot audit. They walked onto the warehouse floor and demanded to see the physical seals and the verification logs for the 3 containers. Logan, sweating through his custom-tailored suit, couldn't produce the broken seal. When the officers examined the digital logs, they found that Logan had marked the seals as verified 3 hours before. The trucks had even passed through the warehouse gates. Even worse, when they physically inspected the cargo, they found that 4 pallets of control units were missing from the compromised container, likely stolen while the truck was parked at an unsecured rest stop during the highway storm. The CBP officers acted immediately. They issued a temporary freeze order on the Chicago bonded warehouse, halting all outbound cargo releases. For Apex, this was a disaster. $34 million worth of DAC cargo was trapped inside a secure facility, and we couldn't legally move a single box. When Bradley Vance found out, he didn't look at his son's incompetence. He looked for a scapegoat. He needed someone to take the fall so he could protect Logan and avoid admitting to the board of directors that his family management was destroying the company's reputation. That brought us back to the conference room on Friday morning. "You are the Director of Customs Compliance, Howard," Bradley said, pointing a finger at me. His voice was tense, his face flushed with anger. "The security of that warehouse is under your jurisdiction. You failed to implement automated safeguards to prevent these logs from being entered incorrectly. You failed to supervise the Chicago team. This security breach has put our CPAT status in jeopardy and frozen our largest client's cargo. This is gross negligence, and it has cost this company its reputation." "Logan was the manager on duty, Bradley," I said quietly. "He physically ordered the seals to be cut, and he falsified the federal records in the ACE portal. I have the email exchanges where I warned you 6 months ago that his practices were a violation of CPAT's security protocols, and your response telling me to stop micromanaging him. Logan is the operations manager. He doesn't handle compliance policy," Bradley barked, dismissing my words with a wave of his hand. "As the compliance head, the buck stops with you. We've already notified the board that we are terminating you immediately. And because this is a termination for cause due to gross negligence, your employment contract is void. You will not receive the 12 months of severance pay, nor will you receive your outstanding bonuses." I sat in silence for a few seconds. In my 18 years at Apex, I had seen Richard Vance build this company with sweat and integrity. It took his nephew less than 6 months to turn it into a country club of incompetence. I looked down at the termination letter. It was signed by Bradley. "Understood," I said. I didn't argue. I didn't threaten them with lawsuits. I knew that in the corporate world, if you show your hand too early, your opponent has time to prepare. I stood up, walked back to my office, and began to pack my personal belongings into a cardboard box. I made sure to download my personal CPAT custodian records, the signed indemnity agreements regarding the customs bond, and every email I had sent to Bradley and Logan over the last year. As I walked out of the building, Logan was standing by the reception desk, a smug smirk on his face. "Thanks for the office, Howard," he whispered as I passed. I smiled at him. "Enjoy it while it lasts, kid," I said. I walked out to my car, placed the box in the trunk, and checked my watch. It was 11:45 a.m. I had exactly 24 hours before my next move. I drove home, sat down at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop. It was time to pull the plug. By the time I reached my house, the adrenaline had faded, replaced by the cold, methodical focus of an experienced compliance officer. I didn't waste time feeling sorry for myself. I sat down at my desk and called Clifford Bennett, my personal attorney. Clifford was a veteran of maritime and customs law, a man who had spent 40 years navigating the federal bureaucracies of international trade. I emailed him my termination letter and the signed indemnity agreement from 3 years ago. Clifford reviewed them while I waited on the line. I could hear him shuffling papers over the phone. "Well, Howard, they really stepped in it this time," Clifford said, his dry chuckle coming through the speaker. "They fired you for cause to cheat you out of your $210,000 severance. But by doing that, they've executed their own corporate execution warrant. The indemnity agreement is crystal clear. Section 12 gives you the absolute right to revoke your personal guarantee on their continuous customs bond within 24 hours of termination. Have you logged into the ACE portal yet?" "Not yet," I replied. "I wanted to make sure my legal ducks were in a row first." "File the disassociation immediately," Clifford advised. and I'll send a formal letter to Liberty Surety Group to cancel your guarantee on the bond. By tomorrow at noon, Apex Global Freight will be operating without a licensed customs broker and without a continuous import bond. In the eyes of the United States government, they won't be a logistics company anymore. They'll be an unlicensed entity trying to move cargo illegally. As soon as we hung up, I opened the Automated Commercial Environment, or ACE, portal on my laptop. The ACE portal is the primary electronic pipeline connecting importers, customs brokers, and CBP. It is where every customs entry is filed, every duty is paid, and every cargo release is authorized. Because I was the qualifying broker of record for Apex Global Freight, my personal credentials were tied to their corporate profile. I navigated to the broker license maintenance section. I entered my license number, selected Apex Global Freight's corporate entity, and clicked the button to file an official notice of disassociation under 19 CFR, paragraph 111.45. This regulation states that if the qualifying officer of a corporate customs broker leaves the company, the corporation must immediately notify the Commissioner of Customs. The electronic system processed the request instantly. A red status bar appeared on the screen. Disassociation filed. Corporate license status. Pending suspension next. I drafted a formal notification to the port director at the Port of Los Angeles and the Port of Newark, as well as the CB Broker Management Branch. I informed them that effective immediately, I was no longer supervising the customs business of Apex Global Freight. Then came the heavy hammer, the continuous customs bond. I pulled up the portal for Liberty Surety Group, the underwriters who issued the $500,000 continuous customs bond that guaranteed Apex's imports and their bonded warehouse operations. Using the digital key provided in my personal indemnity agreement, I filed the revocation request. Because the bond was backed by my personal credit and my license, and because Apex had breached the terms of our contract by terminating me without cause, Liberty Surety was legally required to cancel the bond. They processed the cancellation, scheduling it to take effect at exactly 12 p.m. on Saturday. Finally, I opened a separate portal to the Customs Trade Partnership Against Terrorism, or CPAT. CTPAT is a voluntary supply chain security program. Companies that are CTPAT certified get their cargo cleared much faster, with minimal physical inspections, because CBP trusts their security practices. Apex's certification was registered under my personal portal account as the designated security officer. I uploaded the PDF copies of the warehouse audit reports I had conducted, along with the physical evidence of the broken bolt seal on the Detroit Auto Component shipment and the digital logs showing that Logan Vance had falsified the seal verification entry in the ACE system. I added a formal notice that I was resigning as the security officer and that the current warehouse management was actively bypassing CPAT security protocols to inflate their intake speed. With a few clicks of a mouse, I had dismantled the entire legal framework that allowed Apex Global Freight to exist. To the outside world, nothing had changed. The trucks were still driving, the containers were still sitting on the water, and Bradley Vance was probably still congratulating himself on saving the company a few $100,000. But in the databases of the Department of Homeland Security, a series of red flags had just been raised. Without a licensed broker of record, Apex was no longer authorized to file customs entries. Without a continuous customs bond, they could not secure the payment of duties on imported goods, meaning CBP would not release any cargo. And with their CPAT status suspended and a report of active security fraud on file, every single container associated with Apex would be flagged for intensive physical inspection. I closed my laptop, walked into the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of iced tea. It was 3 p.m. on Friday. The weekend was about to begin, but for Bradley and Logan Vance, the next 72 hours were going to be a living hell. I sat on my porch enjoying the quiet spring afternoon, knowing that when the sun rose on Monday morning, the bill for my 18 years of loyalty would finally fall due. Logan had wanted my office. He was about to find out that the chair came with a mountain of fire. The collapse of Apex Global Freight began at exactly 7:30 a.m. on Monday morning. I knew this because my phone began to vibrate on my nightstand, displaying the number for Apex's headquarters. I let it ring. 2 minutes later, it rang again, By 8:15 a.m., I had 12 missed calls from Bradley Vance and 3 text messages from Logan, each one increasing in volume and desperation. The text messages told the story. The first, from Logan at 7:45 a.m., read, "Howard, why is the ACE portal rejecting our customs filings? We have 14 containers of DAC fuel injectors at Newark that are showing entry rejected." Call me the second, at 8:05 a.m., was more urgent. "Howard, CBP officers are at the Chicago warehouse. They've locked the gates. They won't let any delivery trucks in or out. They say our bond is canceled. What did you do?" The third, from Bradley at 8:12 a.m., simply said, "Howard, boardroom, now. We need to talk." I ignored them all. Instead, I made a fresh pot of coffee, sat down at my computer, and opened my email. My personal inbox was flooded with notifications. The automated systems at Detroit Auto Components had already flagged the customs hold on their cargo. Sean Henderson, the supply chain director at DAC, had sent a scathing email to Bradley, copying me on it, before realizing I was no longer with the company. "We have 42 containers of precision components sitting on the docks in Newark and Los Angeles." Sean's email read, "Another 20 containers are trapped in your Chicago bonded warehouse. Our Michigan assembly plant operates on a just-in-time delivery schedule. If these components do not arrive at our assembly line by Tuesday evening at 6 p.m., we will be forced to shut down production. As per Section 4 of our logistics agreement, Apex Global Freight will be held liable for liquidated damages of $120,000 per day for every day the assembly line is inactive. Fix this immediately." I forwarded the email thread to Clifford Bennett, my attorney. 5 minutes later, Clifford called me. "They're calling my office now, Howard," Clifford said, his voice calm and businesslike. "Bradley Vance is on the line. He's hysterical. He's threatening to file criminal charges against you for sabotage and theft of company property. I told him that you didn't take a single piece of company property, and that filing a standard disassociation with CBP is a federal legal requirement for any licensed broker who leaves a firm. I've scheduled a video conference for 2 p.m. today. Are you ready?" "I've been ready since Friday morning, Clifford," I said. At 2 p.m. I logged onto the video link. Bradley and Logan were sitting in the Apex boardroom. Bradley's tie was loosened, his hair was disheveled, and his face was a dark shade of red. Logan sat beside him, looking pale and staring at the table. Clifford Bennett sat in his wood-paneled office, looking as calm as a judge. "This is sabotage, Howard!" Bradley shouted the moment the connection was established. Leaning so close to the camera I could see the sweat on his forehead. "You deliberately sabotaged this company's operations. You canceled our customs bond. You shut down our warehouse. You reported us to CBP. We have 70 containers of auto parts frozen, and DAC is going to charge us $120,000 a day starting tomorrow. I'm going to sue you for every dime you have. I've already called our corporate attorneys." Clifford raised a hand, cutting Bradley off with a cool, authoritative tone. "Mr. Vance, I suggest you lower your voice and listen very carefully to the legal reality of your situation. Sabotage implies an illegal act of destruction. My client has done nothing of the sort. Under federal law, 19 CFR 111.45, a licensed customs broker who terminates their employment with a corporation must file a notice of disassociation immediately. If Howard had failed to do so, he would have been complicit in the illegal operation of an unlicensed customs brokerage, putting his personal license at risk." "What about the bond?" Bradley screamed. "He canceled the continuous bond. That warehouse is locked down because of him." "No, Mr. Vance," Clifford replied smoothly. "The continuous customs bond was backed by Howard's personal guarantee because your own financial mismanagement destroyed Apex's credit rating 3 years ago. Under Section 12 of the Personal Indemnity Agreement, signed by your uncle Richard Vance, the bond is tied to Howard's employment. When you terminated Howard for cause, you executed the clause that allowed him to revoke his guarantee. You had 24 hours to secure a replacement bond. You failed to do so. The responsibility for the warehouse shutdown lies entirely with your own failure to secure credit. We can just get another broker." Logan chimed in, trying to sound confident. "We're already talking to a logistics firm in New Jersey." I spoke up for the first time. "Go ahead, Logan," I said, keeping my voice flat. but you should know that registering a new qualifying broker of record with CBP takes at least 15 business days. And because of your credit rating, any surety company is going to require a full collateral deposit of $500,000 in cash before they underwrite a new continuous bond. Even if you have the cash, the approval process through the ACE portal takes time. Meanwhile, the clock is ticking on the DAC contract. By the time you get a new broker and a new bond, you'll owe DAC over $2 million in liquidated damages. Apex will be bankrupt before the month is over. Bradley stared at the camera, the anger draining from his face, replaced by a hollow, desperate realization. He knew I was right. In the logistics industry, time is measured in dollars, and they were out of time. "What do you want, Howard?" Bradley asked. His voice suddenly quiet, almost a whisper. Clifford Bennett pulled a document onto his screen. "We have prepared a formal settlement agreement," Clifford said. "If you want Howard to return as a consultant to transition your operations, and if you want him to reinstate his guarantee on the customs bond for a limited period of 90 days while you secure a replacement, you will agree to the following terms." Clifford read the demands. First, payment of Howard's full severance package of $210,000, as stipulated in his original contract. Second, payment of $75,000 in accrued but unpaid performance bonuses from the last fiscal year. Third, a bond release and indemnity buyout fee of $250,000 to compensate Howard for the personal financial risk of backing your warehouse operations during the transition. Fourth, $45,000 to cover Howard's legal fees. And fifth, a 10-day consulting agreement at $5,000 per day, totaling $50,000, to assist in transitioning the broker of record once you find a qualified replacement. "That's $580,000, Bradley gasped, slamming his hand on the table. "That's extortion." "No, Mr. Vance," Clifford said coolly. "That is the price of your nephew's incompetence. You have until 5 p.m. today to wire the funds to our escrow account and sign the agreement. If the funds are not received, the bond remains canceled, the warehouse remains locked, and you can explain to your board of directors why a $210,000 severance dispute turned into a multi-million-dollar bankruptcy. The choice is yours." Clifford ended the video call, leaving Bradley and Logan staring at a blank screen. I looked at my watch. It was 2:15 p.m. They had less than 3 hours to save their family business. I took a sip of my tea, feeling a deep, quiet satisfaction. The chess match was almost over, and the king was in checkmate. At exactly 4:42 p.m. on Monday afternoon, my phone rang. It wasn't Bradley Vance this time. It was a representative from my bank's commercial accounts division, confirming that a wire transfer of $580,000 had been received and cleared into my escrow account. Seconds later, an email from Clifford Bennett arrived with the signed settlement agreements, the formal retraction of the gross negligence charges, and a written apology signed by both Bradley and Logan Vance. I reviewed the documents carefully. Bradley's signature was shaky, a physical testament to the panic he had experienced over the last 4 hours. Logan's signature was barely legible, likely written, while his father screamed at him to sign the papers. They had signed away their pride, their leverage, and over $500,000 of the company's cash reserves, all because they thought they could cheat a veteran employee. I sat down at my computer, logged into the ACE portal, and reinstated my license association with Apex Global Freight's corporate account. I also contacted the underwriters at Liberty Surety Group to temporarily reinstate my guarantee on the continuous customs bond, setting a hard expiration date of exactly 90 days from today. Next, I sent a direct email to the port directors at the Port of Newark and the Port of Los Angeles, attaching the temporary bond reinstatement and the active broker status. Within 30 minutes, the digital holds in the customs database cleared. The red suspension flags turned to green, and the ocean containers carrying Detroit Auto Components engine control units were released for transport. I also made one final phone call. I dialed Sean Henderson, the supply chain director at DAC. Sean answered on the first ring, his voice tense. "Howard, I heard you're back on the account," Sean said. "The port just cleared our containers. The trucks are moving. Are we out of the woods?" "For now, Sean, I said, keeping my tone professional but candid. The cargo will arrive at your Michigan assembly plant by tomorrow morning. Your line won't shut down. But you need to know the truth. This wasn't a systems failure or a routine customs delay. Bradley Vance terminated me last week without cause and tried to scapegoat me for a security breach caused by his son, Logan. Logan has been systematically bypassing CPAT seal verification protocols at the Chicago warehouse to hit intake metrics. I reported the violations to CBP, which is why the warehouse was locked down. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear Sean's breathing, tight and controlled. Logan Vance falsified customs records? Sean asked, his voice cold. Yes, I replied. I have the physical audit reports and the digital logs. Apex's CPAT certification is currently suspended pending a full federal investigation. I've agreed to back their customs bond for 90 days to prevent your cargo from being blocked again, but after that, I am completely disassociating from the company. If I were in your position, I would begin looking for a new logistics provider immediately. Apex, under Bradley's leadership, is a sinking ship. Thank you for telling me, Howard, Sean said. I appreciate your honesty. You've saved our assembly line twice now. Keep in touch. 3 weeks later, the final reckoning arrived for Bradley and Logan. Richard Vance, the retired founder and majority shareholder of Apex, had been vacationing in Florida, completely unaware of the disaster. When the quarterly financial reports hit his desk, showing a sudden $580,000 cash drain, along with a formal notice of CPAT suspension and a letter from DAC terminating their $34 million contract. At the end of the year, he flew back to New Jersey immediately. Richard called an emergency board meeting. He demanded a full accounting of what had happened. Bradley tried to lie, claiming that I had extorted the company and that the customs delays were due to a government glitch. But Richard wasn't a fool. He called Clifford Bennett, who provided him with the entire paper trail. The email warnings I had sent about Logan's seal bypass, the audit reports, the signed indemnity agreement, and the termination letter Bradley had drafted. The fallout was swift and brutal. Richard Vance used his voting power as majority shareholder to remove Bradley from his position as chief operating officer. Bradley was stripped of his authority and demoted to a low-level administrative role with no control over operations or finance. Logan was fired on the spot, banned from entering any Apex facility, and faced potential federal charges for falsifying customs records. A few days after the board meeting, Richard Vance called me. His voice sounded old and tired. Howard, I want to apologize, Richard said. I built that company on trust, and my nephew almost destroyed it in 6 months. I should never have left them in charge. I want you to come back, Howard. I'll make you chief operating officer. I'll give you a salary of $300,000, a seat on the board, and a 10% equity stake in the company. We need you to save Apex. I listened to my old boss, feeling a mix of respect for the man he used to be, but also the clear certainty of my own future. I appreciate the offer, Richard, I said gently. But I can't come back. The company I helped you build is gone, and I've already moved on. I've started my own firm, Garrison Trade Compliance Group. We specialize in international supply chain audits and customs brokerage consulting. I understand, Richard sighed. I can't blame you. If you ever need anything, Howard, let me know. Actually, Richard, there is one thing, I said. I'll need you to sign the release form for my customs bond today. Your 90 days are up, and my new firm is taking over compliance for a few major accounts. Richard signed the release that afternoon. My new firm was successful from day one. My first client was Detroit Auto Components. Sean Henderson hired Garrison Trade Compliance Group on a $15,000 monthly retainer to audit their entire global supply chain and manage their customs compliance. Within 6 months, 3 other major automotive suppliers left Apex and signed contracts with my firm. Sometimes I drive past the Apex office building on my way to the port. I see the sign and I remember the years I spent there, working late nights in the warehouse, auditing cargo manifests, and building a system that was meant to last. Bradley and Logan thought they could treat me like an old, expendable asset. They thought that compliance was just a bureaucratic chore, and that a licensed broker was just a name on a piece of paper. They learned the hard way that in the world of international trade, compliance is the key that unlocks the gate. And if you throw away the key, you find yourself locked out in the cold. I sit in my new corner office, looking out over the shipping channels where the giant container ships roll in, knowing that every container moving through those waters is secure, certified, and cleared, under my terms.